We love the games. What about the people that don't do CrossFit? How do they appeal to those individuals? Because other people are doing it. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't do snowboarding, but when watching somebody fly through the air at 100 miles an hour and jump 100 feet, that's not a gimmick. That's part of their sport, but it is interesting. And gosh dang it makes for really good retweets and reposts on Instagram. So it's not up to me to decide what the trajectory of the games needs to be. But empirically speaking, they're not doing the job of grabbing audiences that don't do CrossFit. And if you cannot do that, you will not become a premier sport anywhere. Flat out, bar none, quote me on that. And if they can solve that problem, then guess what? Games Outfit's going to make a heck of a lot of money. But they haven't solved it yet, and I don't know how they're going to do it.
Hey, it's Ben Wise, and this is The Fitness Movement. The Fitness Movement is brought to you by Zor Fitness. Zor Fitness is my company and my platform to deliver training content to coaches and athletes like you. The site has educational resources on everything from program design and exercise physiology to skill progressions and movement breakdowns. And in terms of programming, we have our online training program, The Protocol, and I also offer one-on-one remote coaching. It's all at one place, zorfitness.com. Today we have Justin LoFranco on the show. He actually went to college at Biola University in Southern California for political science. And then he actually spent 7 years working in politics in Washington, D.C. And as part of that, he actually ran a presidential campaign. And Justin credits a lot of the skills that he developed during this time to the success of Morning Chalk Up. Things like the ability to work hard, long hours, and to be able to acquire new skills quickly and have a high level of adaptability as being crucial. So as he finished that presidential campaign, rather than jumping right to the next one, he kind of took a step back and asked, is this what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? And ultimately he decided to step away from politics and start his own company. So he actually ended up starting a CrossFit newsletter. Fast forward, Justin is the CEO of Morning Chalk Up. It's about a 5 to 7 minute read, hits tens of thousands of readers every day. They publish multiple pieces of content every day that newsletter goes out, including articles, podcasts, videos, and a whole lot more as we'll talk about. And ask anyone in the space, Morning Chalk Up has really separated itself as the go-to source for CrossFit community and games-related content. And today we get into what propelled Morning Chalk Up into the limelight and ultimately to become the go-to news outlet for CrossFit. How their staff manages to balance objective news and facts with doses of informed opinion. Planning content and balancing different reader interests. How Justin landed at his unique writing style for short form reads. How he decides which projects to pursue and which ones to set aside. And lastly, Justin's thoughts on the news games format and how to professionalize CrossFit as a sport. You can follow him on Instagram at ChalkUpJLo, Twitter at JLow, spelled JayLow, and of course at Morning Chalk Up on Instagram and Twitter. Without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Justin LoFranco. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously, for people who don't know you, you're the CEO of Morning Chalk Up, and you guys have really been covering some pivotal moments within CrossFit. And, Morning Chalk Up as a company has sort of been gotten to be able to put in the middle of a lot of those pivotal moments. I'm thinking of 2018, basically death of regionals, sort of the shift to CrossFit Health, and you guys covered that. And I'm just kind of imagining like what it was like. I mean, obviously that was one of the big, things that helped catapult you. So I'm just like imagining you're like sitting at your desk one day and like you get like an email that pops through from like Greg at CrossFit.com, or like, how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually not that much different than that, to be honest, but we've been sort of poking around at like hearing some rumors. So we started poking around and trying to confirm information, try to get and gather like what the story is. So I went and basically felt like I had some idea of what was going on, what was happening inside of CrossFit HQ. And so I had reached out to somebody at CrossFit and I said, hey, look, I was like, I think I've got like 90% of the story. And I mean, do you guys want to talk about this? Because, give an opportunity to weigh in. Like, well, let me get back to you. And it wasn't shortly after that, I got a text message and it was like, hey, you want to get on the phone with Greg and the CEO? and they want to talk through some of the stuff. And I was like, all right, let's see what's up. And then obviously the conversation was a lot different than I had expected. Now, I definitely, the story that we had and the story that we knew about was accurate, true, just was only part of it. And, then they went on to reveal the sort of other elements of it that I wasn't fully aware of. And then the rest is history. So yeah, it was an odd day. I had to kind of like take a step back after this phone call, and I was like, "Oh man, this is big. This is a big day." And I'm like the only person outside of the organization who has any idea what's happening. And
Yeah.
I just need to take a minute. I went for a drive. I went to the grocery store. Actually, I went to the grocery store. I was like, I got to do something normal for a minute and just clear my head because I got to put this piece together. And there's a lot of stuff swirling in my brain. And that was a big day. And the rest was like, okay, then it was off to the races. As soon as we published that, it was like wildfire, right? And everything was just blowing up.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard people say before, like, takes like years of success to be like, years of work to be an overnight success. So you guys were obviously in the position where like you were the news outlet that they chose to go to. Like there's other options out there. Obviously, like you position yourself where like you were like the go-to. So, what do you feel like was the catalyst that got you to the point where like CrossFit is now like, oh yeah, we'll go to Morning Chalk Up for this kind of stuff?
We had, absolutely. It takes years of hard work to have overnight success. And I think we'd set ourselves up very well by continuing to be an authoritative voice inside of CrossFit day over day. We produce a product that tens of thousands of people are engaging with on a regular basis. And then we continue to do that over and over again, continuing to increase our, our notoriety, our name ID, and make friends inside of the building too. And yeah, there were other people writing about CrossFit back then. But we'd done a lot of hard work to forge relationships and actually have cell phone numbers or email addresses for key individuals. And we regularly interacted with them, emailed them, called them, texted them, and said, hey, what's going on with this? What's going on with this? And so as a byproduct of that and being in front of them, I think it was an easy choice for the team. And we were pretty much there. We missed some key components of it. We missed some of the longer term elements of it, but like as far as like who was getting let go, the media staff getting gutted, and regionals changing a format altogether, we kind of already were there. And so we had set ourselves, we were able to do that work because we were doing good work every day. And then because of that and the relationships we built, they said, oh yeah, I mean, they're there. Let's just call them and talk to them anyways. So we're like, okay, we're here. Let's do this. And obviously we didn't think it was going to blow up as much as it did, just because, it was a massive story. It's like once in a reporter's lifetime that they, expect to get, the exclusive drop on something that was that sort of big. Right. And so it was a big moment.
Absolutely. So how much now, like post that, are they like CrossFit is like coming to you with stuff is like, hey, don't say like basically is interacting with you, but it's like, okay, this is when we're actually going to like let this go versus like you just get completely caught off guard, like had no clue. Like, let's use the example of like Dave Castro. Like, did you have any clue that was happening, or was that just like dropped on everybody?
Well, that was dropped on everybody, I think, including Dave himself.
Right.
I don't think, anybody thought or estimated, hey, you know what, look, like we've been hearing rumblings for the last couple of weeks, something might be going down. Nothing like that. I think they can't play their cards very close to their chest when it came to something like that. And so I didn't have any heads up that was happening. It happened. We started getting wind of it. We were able to report on it, et cetera. Right. So we were in a strong position to be able to do that. With other news, it just depends. It just depends on what it is. So CrossFit obviously makes its own internal announcements. I'll give you an example. Right. Their interim new head of CrossFit was announced yesterday. The external announcement came from us because we tracked it down and we tracked down that information. Whereas she had made that announcement earlier in the day to an all hands meeting with CrossFit. We caught wind of it a couple of hours later. We verified that information with individuals on the call, went back to CrossFit and said, hey, would you guys provide some kind of statement in regards to this? And they said, sure, here you go. We put the story together, got that out there. And then in other instances, they're giving us a heads up and saying, hey, we've got, some announcements coming out about this. Here's, would you like an embargoed copy? and that basically means, for those that aren't familiar with the press parlance and how that stuff works, is effectively, it's like, hey, look, we'll give you an embargoed copy so you can prepare, ask questions, have the information ahead of time. And then it's going to be embargoed until delivery or until a specific day and time. So it's embargoed until Monday at 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. And then after that, you can release any story you want to. And so there's times when they're like the rule book. The rule book is massive release. So, in the past, they've given us an advanced copy to be able to read through things, and be able to ask questions, be able to get clarity on certain points that we find are unclear or that we don't understand, or maybe something else, and then prepare, our own materials, our own stories or analysis on that. So it happens both. We find information out on our own, and we're able to provide a scoop, or sometimes they work with us, and that goes across the board. It's not just CrossFit; it's brand partners, brands in general. People come to us, a lot of press releases under embargo, or coming to us with the exclusive drop, because they know that that's an effective way to get earn media and get their story out there.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think a lot of people probably maybe assume that certain events are like known ahead of time, or like, maybe even the people at HQ don't even know the announcement. Not. Right. And it could just completely depend,
sometimes,
right? Like, I'm sure there's,
in fact.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think I'm kind of looking in as an outsider, I kind of have to assume that it would be challenging to sort of balance like being like a news source and also like having writers who want to express their own voice. So what I mean is, like, you write. So like there could be like, you could be doing like journalism where it's more like objective, like this is what's happening. But there's also times where you want to write down and be able to more so like express your opinion about certain topics. Like, how do you go like balancing those two things?
Yeah, it's a great question. So essentially, there's news stories, and then there are, I don't know if I wouldn't necessarily call them opinion pieces, but so news stories are pretty easy to figure out, like, as far as like what is a news story, in fact, and you can look at that and go, yeah, that's a news story, and then there's sports stories as well. And sports stories have a tendency to draw in more of the writer's individual perspectives on this, because sports is, largely speaking, one big giant opinion. But will this team or that team win? Well, I mean, I can use facts. I can use some past analysis. I can use some past history of what's gone on between these two teams playing one another. I can use some numbers and some figures, but ultimately it's how I read those figures that determine how I will analyze the situation and come to a conclusion. A lot of sports reporting is, in fact, all opinion. Now, it's calculated opinion. It's analysis, and that's why we call them sports analysts. Is that they're actually taking a bunch of information, and they are making a read on that. And that is all opinion. That is all the analyst's analysis of that. So there's that area too. So when you can obviously say, hey, this is what happened, or this is what I think will happen. You get into this is what I think will happen, you're all in sports analysis territory. Pull up ESPN's First Take and tell me that any of that is not opinion, and you're wrong. It's all opinion, right? What does Charles Barkley think is going to happen in the Dallas Mavericks game tonight? Well, Charles Barkley thinks that the Dallas Mavericks are going to lose. They're probably going to lose by 15. Why? Well, because in Game 5 matchups between these two teams, traditionally speaking, it's been a blowout, especially when the team that's ahead 3-1 is going home. Great. Then there's opinion. We are thought leaders inside of CrossFit, like it or not. So we, as in the staff that writes and produces content every day for Morning Chalk Up, represents the individuals with the pulse on what's going on. We talk to the people that are inside the room when decisions are made, large or small. We're on the phone every day with athletes, managers, stakeholders, organizers, people inside of CrossFit, and getting a sense from them of what's going on, what's happening, what are the decisions that are made, why are they being made that way, what are the situations, what are the pitfalls, what are the successes or failures inside of those elements. And because of that, we're able to form very strong opinions about other things. So it could be a good example, like judging. Judging has been a hot topic, obviously, for the last couple of months, really since the beginning of the Open. As more and more media has been pointing out discrepancies inside of judging and how it's being played out, CrossFit's response to that. There are opportunities and times when the staff can and does share their opinion in an opinion-based format. And that could be just like on, obviously, video. We have a show, The Bottom Line, where it's meant to be our reporters' best take on those particular things and stuff. And so they're organizing and gathering their ideas and presenting them in that format. Sometimes we do that in written form too. So it just kind of depends on what it is. But those when they do write it says opinion, and it says opinion piece and stuff. And they're really some of the most authoritative opinion pieces that are produced out there because they do this professionally, and every single day they're hopping on the phone and talking to different people, gathering that information, getting different perspectives. And a reporter who's writing a news story that's basically fact only is very valuable. But so is a reporter who spends every single day talking to people in the subject matter, because reporters are intended to bring in perspective. They're intended to bring in perspective that's both disclosed and undisclosed. Undisclosed would be something that's on background, and having an on background conversation with an event organizer saying, hey guys, this is what's been going on, and these are the challenges that we've been facing. They should incorporate those perspectives in there. And that's what a good reporter is meant to do.
Yeah, I think you guys do an excellent job at balancing those two. And I think the people in the community really, I think that's why they go to you, right? Is because they get both. It's not just like the cut and dry. Like if they just wanted a statement, they would just, wait for CrossFit to release something where it's like, they want not just the truth. They want a little bit more than that as well. They want to know the less, manicured version of that, right? That's not just like what they're putting out to the public. So another thing that you guys, I think, again, as someone looking in, what I feel like would have to be really tough is like, you want to report to the community and you want to give them the most accurate things. And oftentimes that just puts CrossFit not in a great light because they've made just like a ton of, just decisions that are controversial. And then there's just stuff that's like flat out, like objectively bad. And like, I feel like, so maybe some of the stuff like that's clearly objectively bad, like maybe we can sidestep some of that, but like, are you ever worried that like you're going to publish something that's like CrossFit puts CrossFit in a negative light and that they're just like, you know what, like you're dead to me. Not that like you couldn't operate anymore, even if they like tried to sue you or something. Right. But like, they just kind of cut ties with you where you're not their go-to anymore. Is that like something that you worry about?
No, not really. And I've told this to staff before, and I've said this on, I think, other public forums as well. I live by a maxim, which is do not write for your detractors. Do not write for your critics. If you do and you produce for your critics, for your detractors, for the individuals who are throwing the most stones, you will never be happy. Not with the product that you produce and not with how you've done it. And you will never make them happy. So my job is not to make CrossFit HQ happy or look good, in fact. And if they get upset over it, then that's their fault. That's their prerogative. If they choose to get upset over that, that's fine. Most of the time when you write about something that's been done wrong or poorly, it's the individual gets upset because somebody found out about it or because somebody found out about it and wrote about it. Not that everything CrossFit does is wrong, and that's not at all what I'm saying or the picture that I'm painting. But there's a lot of people shoot the messenger in news. They like to shoot the messenger, like, well, this wouldn't have been a big deal if you hadn't made it a big deal. And I'd say, well, it wouldn't have been a big deal if you hadn't done it. So I did care a long time. I wanted to, and I do want to have a good relationship with everybody that we write about. But the truth of the matter is that mistakes will be made, and that in a democracy, it's important to bring those mistakes to light. I'll give you a good example of that. With the refusal to invalidate scores on the leaderboard, that's their choice. They run the competition. If they want to run it that way, that's completely up to them. Now, it's a good thing for somebody to go out there and report about it, and I encourage everybody who thinks that that's an important thing to discuss it openly. Things with Scott Panchik getting injured. I think that the fact that oftentimes press are not invited to briefings is problematic because it doesn't allow us to be there when that thing happens. So we have to rely on individuals that were there. And that is something that should be. Does it make them look bad? Yes, it does. Should they have done it? Change it? Probably. That's not really my call. But we take on the role and responsibility of bringing things like that to light, reporting on them if it matters. Does it matter? Is it informative? Is it something that competitors or fans or stakeholders should know about? If the answer to that is yes, then I don't really care who gets upset. I do not write for my detractors. I tell my staff not to write for their detractors, for those who are the biggest critics. If you do that, if you choose to go down that road, you will never be satisfied with what you do, and you will never satisfy them. And that goes, that I live by that rule. Professionally, I live by that rule. You will go to sleep knowing that even if everybody hates you in the world, you've done the job that you set out to do. As long as you're very clear about what that job is. And I try to be as clear as possible about what that is and what it looks like. So no, the answer is no. I used to stop caring. Yeah. Now I just want to do my job and go to sleep.
I mean, I'm sure as someone who has like enough eyes on what you're putting out, like you're going to upset a lot of people pretty early on as, you know, when you're popular. So it's like, you probably have to develop thick skin for that. And I guess that's the best way to do that's what you're saying, right? Like where it's like, you know, if you're always concerned about what the people who are naysayers are going to say, then it's like, yeah, you're never going to be satisfied with yourself.
And my previous career was politics. So, I mean, I certainly developed thick skin. And also when you start waffling on your position, and you guys, we're not in the presidential cycle yet, but once we start getting into it, pay close attention to what people say. And if they flip-flop, they get eaten up alive. So if you're going to be a flip-flopper and you're going to have any popularity and notoriety, you're just going to get skewered. So my recommendation is not to do that.
There you go. So Morning Chalk Up posts nearly 1,000 stories a year. As you're planning and ultimately publishing content, like what are some of the big considerations that you have? Like, that's a lot of stories. Like, what big picture, like when you zoom out and kind of see the calendar, like obviously there's different, you're piecing that timeline in different points. Like, what are some of the big considerations while you're going through that timeline?
Well, I touched on a little bit of them in my previous answer, which is this information necessary, right? Like, so when we're covering necessary information, I consider that like, community needs to know about this. So is it there's a part of the season or the updates about, the sport and how that's structured. So that information, it's very easy when you step back and you look at it from that perspective, it's very easy to go, yeah, of course we talked about when the rule book was coming out or when it did come out. Because frankly, you need to know about that. If you're going to compete in the sport of CrossFit, whether you're elite or not, doesn't really matter. If you're going to sign up for the Open, you should darn well know what the rules say. So we're going to help lay that out for you. And we're going to write stories to tell you, hey, this is actually happening. This is why it matters. And this is why you should care. And these are the things you need to know about that. So that's information just as a basic fundamental service. So we sign up for that. 40 to 50% of our stories just are on, hey, these are things you should know, and this is why you should care about it. That's basic blocking and tackling. And we get to cover obviously a lot of interesting subject matter inside of that. So, I mean, that comes from everything from these are new products that have been released to this is who performed at the last event, the last competition.
That's what I would say. Like, that's why I open your newsletters. Like, I want to know what's going on. Like, and you guys do an excellent job of that. And that's why I open it every day. Like,
precisely. So
yeah.
And then that's information as a service. And then we go beyond that and we say, okay, look, we can't cover everything, right? So every day when we go and look at the landscape of stories that come into our inboxes and things that we hear about, we say, hey, have we read about anything this in the past or previously? If we have, has anything changed or that's new? Has this story developed beyond what we originally wrote? If it's developed, then we should maybe write or consider writing about the development. If it is not, then, maybe we're not going to bring that back up. And then we talk about also inspiration or just stories and human interest about out pockets and elements of the community. So we talk a lot about adaptive. We talk a lot about various types of athletes. We focus heavily not on elites. Elites primarily at the sports coverage. But when it comes to the community-based coverage, we want to talk about business insights and how different gyms are running and operating their gyms and finding success inside of that. What are other pockets or fringe athletes communities that get less coverage, that perhaps need more coverage? What stories are going on in there that are inspirational, not only for ourselves, but for themselves and for the community at large? And so we constantly seek out things that haven't been told yet, or that have been told, or that have developed beyond their original story time frame. So we don't set a calendar. In fact, we obviously have a sports calendar where we follow the sport, through from its preseason phases all the way through to the games, and that keeps us pretty well structured, from a sports perspective. But then beyond that, we know. I mean, I've been hit up probably 3 or 4 times this week with other stories being like, hey, we're doing this. Hey, we're doing this. Would you guys want to cover it? Would you want to, would you work on a story on that? Okay, let's evaluate it and run it through the traps and stuff. And so we get a lot of people coming to us for news, and the community is obviously massive, right? The CrossFit community just in the United States is more than 5,000 gyms. And then obviously a lot more individuals that are doing unique things in their own lives. You've got multi-billion-dollar industry on the business side that's doing different things, launching different products, making innovations, hiring and firing, et cetera, doing developments, having investments, being invested in, et cetera. So with all those things happening simultaneously, you can imagine we actually turn away news that we don't cover,
Yeah, absolutely.
frankly, because just we can't write about everything. So at some point we have to be like, hey, look, like this doesn't rise to the level of a feature story. And if you want to come back to us when something happens, or we've overcovered that issue, and we're gonna pass on it. So it's a massive operation of information, and obviously it keeps us very busy.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned, I mean, even when you scroll through your newsletter, you can see that like you almost have like different tags or like categories that, like, for example, what might be like community or lifestyle, news, CrossFit games, right? So of those like different categories, I remember I listened to your conversation with Jason Kalipa, and you had basically said that, you were really heavily focused towards the games earlier on. And then, he sort of says like, hey, why don't you like take care of the 99%, like all the people in the community who maybe aren't as invested in the games. So like now we're currently at like, how do you think about balancing, and maybe not percentages, but you like sort of that like idea of like, what's the breakdown of like those different categories now?
Yeah. I mean, and that's a great story just about, Jason passed on some like offhand advice to me. We're sitting in a parking lot, actually, in like a Safeway parking lot in Northern California. We're just going to give blood, at like a Stanford blood bank, thing that was sitting in the parking lot. And it's funny because we talked about it later on. He's like, I told you that? I was like, yeah, you did. He's like, I was just like throwing out some advice. I was like, well, it was good advice. And it was the right advice for me at the time, because I was too myopic about the games. That was my big passion. But essentially, not much has changed. And not much has changed the genetic makeup of what we write. Obviously, like I said, the season governs a lot of, hey, we got to cover the season-based stuff because that's what's going on right now. It's obviously very top of mind. But we still have the same audiences that we write for as we did previously. There's a handful of basic audiences, and we write stories and try and ensure that the newsletter or our coverage in general has something specifically for them. We write for elite athletes, those individuals who are actually competing that need to know information about what's going on. We write for coaches and boxers, people that are working inside of the industry that need and want to know about what's going on that affects how they operate, their daily lives, their professions, et cetera. We work for individuals inside of the industry. It's people that work at, places like Reebok or Fit Aid or any of the other brands that we love to buy and purchase, and who's building businesses inside of this ecosystem. You're right for average everyday CrossFitters, people that are just in there to get a workout in, that they may be fans of the sport or not. That's great, but they're there to get the best hour of the day. They're getting a workout in. The last thing is we report for the media. We tell them things that they need to know. And a lot of people rely on that reporting in blogosphere or mostly in podcasts. And that's what I was thinking of originally when I had started this, as that category was specifically for podcasters who were, I'm kind of getting my morning briefing. Like I'm getting everything I need to know here. And that was the intention of doing that, was to be able to inform that audience as well. So by aggregating content for all 5 of those audiences, we basically covered the 5 most important individuals or individual groups, inside of the industry. So we do that constantly, and that's what we're intending to do. So we know not everything in the newsletter is for everybody, but we're trying to make sure there's definitely something in there for all of those people.
Yeah. Yeah. As a remote coach, like you guys have been invaluable to me. Just like, I can't tell you how many times like someone says something, I'm like, well, is this equipment list released yet? Was the rule book out yet? And I just go to you guys' Instagram and then there it is. Yeah. So you've saved me a number of times. So thank you.
That's what we're here for, man. We're making your job.
Absolutely. You really are. All right. So another thing that I've found really interesting about you in particular, but other people on staff as well, is your writing style. So when you're writing, there's this like really clear, it's really easy to read, which is what you want. So like I'm imagining there's kind of two types of people who are gonna click and open an article and like read it. And there's the person who maybe is like reading it line by line verbatim, like they're reading the entire thing, and like that flow makes it really clear to like that there's a clear organization to everything. But then there's also the person who like clicks on it, they just kind of want to like scroll through, skim, kind of get like the basic idea, the premise behind it. And like, again, that's like perfectly, it's so easy for them to be able to get the gist of what they need. So you just released an article, you wrote it about the new interim CEO. And so there's basically like opening statement, there's what they're saying with like a little quote there, 3 bullet points, one big thing, 2 more bullet points after that, what we know, and then a closing statement. And I think I looked back and you've been doing that for a while. I think at least like the past 2 years you've had that format. Have you played with other formats? Like how'd you stumble up, like decide upon that one?
Yeah, we've done different formats in the past. There's been a massive evolution of not just the writing style, but how we present things. How we stumbled on this. I mean, if you go back to the original Morning Chalk Up, it's like so different. But it was actually inspired by a publication I spent years reading in Washington, D.C. called Politico's Playbook. And that was written by Mike Allen. Mike Allen went on to found a new company called Axios, co-founder of Axios, which is a $1 billion news organization inside of DC. It got its first major products were covering politics, and then he moved on to other industries and other areas and stuff like that. But essentially, I migrated from this playbook style to this Axios style, which uses what's called smart brevity. And I felt like it was the best way of forming these authoritative stories and pieces, because its writing style was conducive to being very readable. And we have a monster mobile format or mobile audience. Most of the people digest our content, our stories on mobile devices. I mean, 60+% of people are digesting content on mobile. So I'm prioritizing from a user experience perspective the readability of our stories and elements inside of the newsletter on mobile, knowing that they're going to be scrolling top to bottom. It's not a click and click back and scroll and see story and then read a little bit of that. It's actually a linear process. It's a process of moving from the entry point all the way down to the finish, archiving, and then moving on to the next piece of email that you're going to be reading. So that's how we stumbled upon it. And I've been a big consumer of Axios media for a long time. And so once they started up as a company, I've been a big consumer of Mike Allen's products. And so once he started the company and I started reading that, I said, I think there's some adaptability for us there. We're not ready for it yet. We don't have the staff to be able to do it because I'm writing most of the stories at that point. But I think that we can get there. I want to start experimenting with it. And now we've really adopted it as basically one of our primary formats for disseminating information. As you pointed out, it's very easy to read. It's very clear. You know what you're getting. We've condensed large amounts of information into small bite-sized chunks, which allows you to basically move on to the next story, go about your day, finish your newsletter in 5 to 7 minutes, and be wildly informed about what's going on and why it matters.
Yeah. It's like, instead of, I'm thinking about other people who might be, long form writers, and they want you to sort of be sitting there with a cup of coffee and read the entire thing. And it might take you 15 minutes to get through it. Whereas I'm assuming, but you guys, even if you're looking at scrolling through and it's a 20-second skim, you're okay with that because the person's going to come tomorrow and do the exact same thing. So it's like, for me as like the consumer, when I scroll through, I'm looking for, like, literally, I've done this how many times already? Like, where I see like one big thing, I know that I should probably pay attention to that, right? You start to like almost like train the person how to read it. It's pretty cool.
Precisely. Yeah, and we obviously also produce long form stories as well. Emily Beers is one of our, top tier feature writers. Our managing editor, Patrick Bunner Hassett's an excellent features writer as well. And we have some other new staff that are producing feature stories, longer stories. And these aren't like the sports analysis stories that like Brian and Tommy produce. These are more like feature stories, the kind that are going to have multiple subheaders and going to really dive into maybe the process of what happened and how it came about, to really kind of engage the reader in those. Those pieces are often found in our premium section, where we really do dive into great stories, great storytelling. Those can be sports or community or business based. And so obviously those need to be presented in a different format. They need to be fleshed out with more, with less brevity, in fact, and you would lose a lot of the key nuances into a story like that with brevity. We present those things up in a different format. So we kind of have two distinct formats. We have a features, kind of like this features, long form or profile style. And then we have this brief. When you think about it, you're reading a morning brief. And that's how the morning chalk up should be thought of. And that's how I think of it is, this is your morning briefing. These are the important stories and the elements that are happening inside of CrossFit today. If you read it, you will be informed. You will know what's going on. If you want more information about those things, there's plenty of links to click off to them. And then we also include like feature stories or more in-depth stories too, which obviously people have time, they can go read those things. So you need both. I think as a news organization, you need both, and you need to be able to captivate your audience when those stories arise. And we try to strike the right balance on that. It's a unique challenge inside of the newsrooms to go like, oh man, like I feel like we're being too brief on this, and I'm like, no, precision, smaller, tighter, and then it's like, well, but we missed so many of these other things. That's obviously something we struggle with internally is finding the right balance there. But we want to make sure we're again delivering enough for everybody. There's time and place for those stories, but as a newsletter product, think of it as a briefing. You're going to often opt towards shorter, more concise statements that analyze the field and present that for your reader.
Yeah, 100%. You guys nail that. So yeah, you mentioned that like you have the RX member exclusives, which is basically like a premium content. You guys have, I think you pretty recently introduced this to the community blog, where basically you make a profile and you can post, which is pretty cool. You got like the bottom line videos, like you guys have a lot of stuff going on. And as you said, like a lot of that is longer form content stuff. There's a lot. How do you decide like which projects, like you're like, all right, we're going to pursue this, we're going to go after this, and which ones you're like, I don't think that's appropriate, or I don't think we should pursue that, or, you start it up and it doesn't go well, so you trash it. Like how do you know?
Oh, man, that's yeah. I mean, and as as the individual who primarily has to make those decisions, it's never perfect. Some decisions are obviously very easy. You can look at something economically and just say, look, like we've been taking a massive loss on this type of project for a while. It's time to step away from that. Perhaps we reevaluate it for later. That's a startup kind of mentality phase concept where anybody who's in a decision-making chair that has to make decisions about budgetary items. And we very much are a startup. I mean, in the sense of we do not have outside capital. We do not have a large amount of funding. We've effectively operated profitably at profitability since the beginning, but don't have this monster budget like that we can just dole out to take creative ideas to the nth degree. And so we have to be a little judicious about those things. But essentially, it just comes down to like any other company, like anybody else that's out there that produces, and our news and our stories are our product that produces product. We evaluate it constantly, and we take and ask for the advice. I ask for the advice regularly of the individuals that are around us, around me on the team, and say, okay, well, what do we think about these things? Let's look at analytics. Let's look at the numbers. Sometimes, and I tell you, more often than not, we write stories or pieces, no matter what the cost, because it's too important not to do. We're like, hey, we're going to do this. I don't really care if it's 100% loss. I don't care if it does, nobody reads it. We're going to write it, and we're going to hope and try and push and make sure that people do see this because we think it's important, and we're going to spend the time, energy, and effort to do that. But if nobody does, I don't care. I'm on a mission to hopefully educate and inform our audience about things that matter and that are important and that I think that they would care about. And then for everything else, you just have to make tough decisions about it. The newsletter is a flagship product. That's what we exist to serve and do that on a regular basis. If we cannot continue to do that, and this is another business maxim that I live by, it's that until you have done everything that you've committed to doing to your customers perfectly, you have not earned the right to move on to anything else. Because if you can't make that delivery, and if you do deliver a product 5 days a week, then you are definitely signing yourself up for a tough job. Let me tell you what. But every single day, you've got to sign off on a product delivery. You don't have 3 months to make it perfect. You have to figure out a way to make it perfect every day. If you cannot do that job, then you don't get to sign on any other new options. You have no right to do that unless if you have an unlimited budget. They always say you can do things good, fast, and cheap. Well, we do it pretty good and we do it fast and we do it cheap because we found a way to be fully committed to doing that. But if we take on all those other projects, it takes away from that job. Well, you're not going to be cheap anymore because you're going to be throwing good money away. You're going to be throwing money on opportunities. You're going to be doing all of them, and you're going to start doing things poorly. And I made some decisions a couple of years ago that started to water down what we were delivering, our flagship products, and the quality of them was not as good as it should have been. And we weren't doing it with precision. We weren't doing it with intention. We didn't know exactly why we were doing it to a certain degree, other than we felt like we needed to. And that's not a good enough reason to do anything. Not in business and not when budgets are tight. And so that's how we come to those decisions. Are we the things that we've committed to our audience, to our customers to do? Are we doing them right? Are we doing them well? Are we executing on them on a regular basis? If we're not, then we need to shut up and stop talking about great new ideas that aren't going to get us anywhere. We continue to not be able to deliver the products we promise we're going to do. It's an easy decision when it comes down to those things.
So of the things that like you do decide to take on that are outside of the newsletter, are those things that are like, maybe they just have a clear like ROI, but maybe it's, they're going to like help engage your audience more. It's going to like, it'd be an easy, like sort of click out from the newsletter. What are some of the other considerations when you're thinking about that stuff?
Yeah. So not everything in business makes you money, and not everything should be evaluated based off of its specific financial gain. I'll give you a good example of that. The community platform that we built, the blogging platform that we built that allows people to create an account and tell their story or journey, or allows businesses to talk about their tools for success too, really is, frankly, whatever anybody wants to post up there, was a concept that we tossed around for a very long time, thought about it, and we said, look, like, if you want to tell your story, if you want to talk about CrossFit, we cannot tell everybody's story. We just can't. We will never finish doing that job. We do tell some people's, but there are so many more that are out there. Very inspiring stories, your journeys or transformations, or maybe knowledge or insight that they've gained from being a coach. There's plenty of people out there that have that as well. There's no place to go do that, not one place, and certainly not one place to go read it either. I mean, you can create a Medium account, you could create a Tumblr, and you could blog about those things. You could go create a WordPress site and you could blog about those things. But the barrier to entry to creating a whole site based off of your blog and versus the barrier of entry to go join an existing site that has built-in apparatus and technology and design for those sorts of things that allows you to just publish one piece and get it out there and then share that on Facebook or on Instagram or just with other friends or with your gym. That doesn't exist. So we created one so that it did exist. And we also wanted to create one for the reader who's looking for those things, reader who wants to hear about, transformations from athletes who've gone through postpartum depression, or maybe have used CrossFit to combat that, maybe depression in their own life, their own personal life, postpartum or not. Maybe other mental illnesses or effects that they've had and things that they've gone through in their own life. And the ability to go and read those things and to grab those stories together is really why we created it. So we don't see any real financial upside on anything like that. We spent 6 months building and designing this out internally with our own team, trying to find ways of creating that experience that's good, mirrors other top tier products that are out there, mirrors it, because we know they're not, I can tell you they're not as good. I know that they're not as good, but I'm okay with that because they have $1 million dev team and I do not. So to a certain extent, we're doing the best that we can, but we're trying to provide a product that people can do something for. And we know there are people who love to tell their stories. So we want to create a platform that allows them to do it. We know people love reading about those stories. So we want to create a place that can do that at a scale that we were never going to be able to meet. We were never going to be able to tell. We can only do so much. And so we feel like this is an opportunity to do that. So that's a good example of not looking at it from a financial ROI. We're not going to make any more money. We're not making any money. We host it. We lose money on it, but who cares? I mean, and that's if it turned into this monster blogging platform, I'm sure that there would be some financial gain there, but that would be like, you'd need 100,000, 200,000 users using it. And I frankly, if there's 2,000 people using it, it'd be like, sweet, like that's great. And if they're getting something out of it, that's fantastic. And then they're going to have an opportunity to consume our other media products because they're on the site. So if they want to subscribe to the newsletter. Yes, great. If they want to watch the bottom line episode, great. We get more viewership. We're able to grab more of the pie and more of individuals consuming products on our properties. And that's a net benefit, right? So I recognize that, but that wasn't the primary driver of doing it.
Yeah. The community blog is really cool. The only question I have is like, are those like, do you censor those? Are they like vetted at all? Or is it just like, hey, if you post it, it's going to show up?
No, I mean, it's going to show up. We have some community guidelines that are inside of the terms and conditions, which is fairly standard.
Yeah.
And like, if you want to get yourself into trouble, well, congratulations. You can.
Yeah.
Just like you could do that on Facebook, and you can do that on Medium too.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna give you any examples to help you terrorize the world better. I'm sure I could, come up with some topics that might do that. And and I recognize, somebody can come in and could just totally lambast it and stuff. And we obviously have vigilance on the page.
Yeah.
So looking at stories that have been created and just going like, look, is this something that we feel like needs, and we haven't gotten it. Well, the only time we've actually taken anything down has been like, some people created spam accounts and tried to like post about like live streaming and stuff. And I know inside of CrossFit, it's a prevalent problem. So we banned that account, because clearly it's trying to get people to pay for a live stream that doesn't exist and then, steal their money. So like, obviously we want to make sure we put a kibosh on that. CrossFit has that problem already inside of the industry. They've used our platform before to try to do that. We just ban the accounts and clean it up to make sure that the user experience is really good. Ultimately, we want good stories, but people have their own opinions. If they want to have an opinion that's controversial, then I think that, as far as I know, we still live in a democracy, so they should have the right to do that. We obviously protect ourselves from a liability standpoint with legal disclaimers and stuff. But, I knew that going into it, I wasn't going to do that. And that actually speaks to something else that we do, or don't do, I should say, is we have a policy not to block people, on Instagram. Like, we don't, legally, if you have an opinion, you want to post it here, this is the place to post it. You know what? If you want to have an opinion on Instagram or Facebook or something, or on our site, if you getting into, hate speech or elements like that are vastly inappropriate or even against Instagram's own community guidelines, we may flag a comment, but we don't block people because it's dumb. We block accounts that are spam or pornographic, things like that. That's natural, and that's a normal process in business, is to do that. We want that filtered onto our page. We know there are children who've been looking at our pages, teenage athletes that are in high school or maybe even younger, and we know that's not appropriate. So we take care to make sure that the page is filtered from unwanted spam, but we don't block people. They have a right to say what they want to say. I don't care. I welcome that. And if you don't, if you want to tell us that we're terrible at our job, you have every right to do that. I'm not going to block you just because you said something mean about us. Like, sometimes it's, you're like, well, I didn't think that was fair, but it's not about me. It's not about Justin. It's not about whether Justin doesn't like you or not. A lot of you hurt his feelings. They have every right to be there. So it's for the same purposes. We treat it the same way.
That's pretty cool. Again, like an organization like CrossFit isn't going to do that. Right. So like I think the fact
they still have people blocked, but that's their thing. We've never written a story about how they block people, but that's, maybe we should have, but that's their own choice as a business if they want to alienate their own people. And that's not what I would do, but that's me.
Yeah. All right. Final question for you. So you're a person who I think is probably uniquely qualified to answer this just because of all, what you do. So, all
right.
What do you think has been good or not so good so far about the new game season? So the 2021, 2022, and hopefully beyond format.
Wow. This is going to get me into trouble. I think it's okay. I think they're looking back, hoping that it moves them forward. So I think they're looking at 2018 saying, we had 416,000 people do it. We had the largest amount of interest. We had the live streaming deal with Facebook, and the games is a big sellout experience and stuff. And so not selling out, sold out experience. And I think they created a regional style format that just asked other people to foot the bill for it. And that's what I mean by looking back to hopefully go forward. I don't really see the sport itself moving forward. I don't really see it moving forward in any particular pace or trajectory that makes me believe that there will be 100 million people tuning in to see the CrossFit Games in a couple of years. So it's not all doom and gloom. I don't see inventiveness. I don't see creativity inside of how they're displaying that. You know, they say things like, yeah, we want athletes to make more money, yet they don't present any real credible opportunities for them to do that. If I asked them a specific question like, well, how much is enough? I don't think they can answer that question for you. I also don't think if I said in 5 years, what's the plan for payouts or for earning potential inside CrossFit, I don't think they have a number that they could point to. I think it's a nice laudable goal to be able to say we'd like athletes to make enough and earn enough to be professional athletes, but they can't put a specific figure to it. You know, and so I think there's a lot of lack of direction as to where the games and a lot of vision for how they're going to put that together to make it a very interesting, viable sport that has fans that don't do CrossFit. This is the thing, you know, there's enough people out there doing CrossFit to have 30,000 people attend the game. There are not. The sport is not entertaining enough to people that don't do fitness, don't do CrossFit. Sorry, not fitness, CrossFit. They have yet to solve that problem. So if I were me, I'd say, well, I would be looking for some very specific benchmarks that you would like to reach as a sport and an organization over the next 5 years. I would also like to hear a vision and a plan for how you plan to make CrossFit appealing from a sports perspective to people that don't do CrossFit. There's plenty of people that don't do football that watch it, right? I played 1 season of football in high school. I, played 4 seasons of basketball, so I love basketball. But I also watch sports that I don't want, that I never played, because they're taking tennis. I've never played tennis. I think tennis is a phenomenal sport to watch. I really love watching those games, right? So they have to create a sport and experience and an entertainment, frankly, that appeals to people that don't do CrossFit. If they cannot solve that problem, they will not have a worldwide sport that reaches any larger audience than a bad game between 2 bad teams on Tuesday in the NBA. So that's what I think.
Yeah, man, I think, of course, people are going to go back and forth about this because it's like CrossFit, the games are a spectator sport. So you need to make it appealing for people watching and entertaining and having a production value that's high enough that people want to watch it and can kind of follow what's going on, and not just like see the leader the whole time or whatever, like all the complaints everybody has. Yeah. And then obviously like there's this whole other side of it that is, that they don't want it to get cheesy or gimmicky and, just be about the people watching either, because they want it to be more about the methodology. And I don't know, obviously that's going to be something that people go back and forth on about the sport versus
I'll tell you this,
methodology.
Look, Ben, I'll tell you this. There are a lot of people that don't have a freaking clue about 95% of the Olympics, but they really like tuning into it. So if you're going to make a comparison or a parallel argument between the Olympics being, hey, this is the Olympics of our sport, there are a lot of things with weightlifting they don't really know about. But deadlift does not look like it's anything they've ever done before. They don't know a lot about swimming or triathlons or running or other things like that. But guess what? All of those things are in the Olympics. A lot of people tune into that. I'm not saying that that's the benchmark to go and say, oh, yeah, we're going to have 250 million people tuning in, the CrossFit Games, because the Olympics has a lot of people tuning in for the Olympic Games. This is a massive worldwide event. But let me be clear. There are people that tune in to watch people throw a stick across the yard. There are more people that do that than watch a CrossFit game. So if that gives you any cause for concern as to whether or not after 15 seasons they figured out the formula to move the ball forward on this, more people tune in to watch somebody throw a stick across a field than watch the CrossFit game. So figure that one out for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what do you think the answer is?
It's not my job to have that answer. I'm just pointing out the obvious here, which is that, look, like in 5 years, if you want to have it, and I don't know the answer, and I think that they want to do that. But like I said, how many people do you want to have watching the games? What success look like for you? How many more people how much more money do you want athletes to make? You have to have the answers to these questions. You have to present a vision that executes on that. Everything that I've talked about for the last 55 minutes has been with precision, with exactitude. We know why we're doing it and we know who we're doing it for. I think the CrossFit also needs to have those things. And I hope that the CEO or the interim head of CrossFit can come in and help do that. I hope Justin Bird can do that. We're rooting for them because their success is tied to our success. Or I'm sorry, reverse that. Our success is tied to their success. And we obviously hope that CrossFit becomes a massive sport, and who would be better to be able to serve up the news media for the sports side of things than the Morning Chonka? So I am actually rooting for them while at the same time criticizing them. That's not that we do this very often in our own platforms, but in answering the question, I'm answering as honestly as possible. That if somebody can throw a stick across the yard and get more of the CrossFit games, then they have to seriously reevaluate whether or not their sport is interesting or not to the outside world. Because it's not about the CrossFitters all love the game. I mean, not all of them. We love the games. What about the people that don't do CrossFit? How do they appeal to those individuals? Because other people are doing it. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't do snowboarding, but when watching somebody fly through the air at 100 miles an hour and jump 100 feet, that's not a gimmick. That's part of their sport, but it is interesting. And gosh dang it makes for really good retweets and reposts on Instagram. So it's not up to me to decide what the trajectory of the games needs to be. But empirically speaking, they're not doing the job of grabbing audiences that don't do CrossFit. And if you cannot do that, you will not become a premier sport anywhere. Flat out, bar none, quote me on that. And if they can solve that problem, then guess what? Games outfit's going to make a heck of a lot of money. But they haven't solved it yet, and I don't know how they're going to do it.
All right, man. We'll leave it there. Thanks for doing this today.
Anytime, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's Ben again. Thanks for listening today. To be completely honest, it's been really rewarding to have people who listen to the show regularly reach out to me, whether they have a question about training or just to say hey. So if you haven't done that yet, do it. I'm pretty good about getting back to people, and you can feel free to email me, ben@zorfitness.com, or message me on Instagram @zorfitness. And graciously, I've had some people reach out to me and ask how they can support the show. Number one way that you can support the show if you are a regular listener is just by rating the show. Most apps have a platform where you can actually rate it, and on Apple Podcasts, you can write a review as well. This is super helpful in having other coaches and athletes find the podcast, but also just having it grow and for me to continue to want to put out more and more content. Also, I'm going to be posting more full episodes of the Fitness Movement to our YouTube channel. So if you're someone who actually enjoys seeing my face when I talk, you can head over to YouTube and subscribe if you please. And if you're someone who is watching on YouTube, you have the ability to like our videos, but then you can also comment on the video if you have questions about the episode or if you want to suggest a topic for a future episode. And lastly, if you're someone who really does value what we're putting out, I would encourage you to hire a coach. For me, coaching is the bulk of my job, and it's what I believe I do best. So if you're an athlete or a coach looking to up your fitness game, be sure to reach out. You can message me on Instagram @ZorFitness or email me ben@zorfitness.com. Thanks again for listening today. And as always, stay the course.